Morning, we're continuing with the fourth of a series of Saturday/Sunday talks in May, sort of punctuating our regular Bhakti Shastri program, which we're about to reconvene in the first Sunday of June. One of the things the CIHE hopes to do is not just focus on registered students, but also to sort of cater to the needs of the wider devotee community. And with the miracle of the internet and, teleconferencing, we're able to have devotees from different parts of the world with different areas of expertise to help us in some essential areas. Just to recap what we did over the last few weeks, we had Urmila Mataji with going over Mana Siksha with us. We sort of joined with the Vedic Cultural Center in Seattle. We had a series of talks on the pastimes of the Goswamis with His Grace Gauranga Prabhu. Last week, we had Madhavananda Prabhu, who is the director of the Bhaktivedanta Hospital in Mumbai, to give us some insight into health and spiritual practice. And one thing I'd like to add is there's many things that as an organization we get right, and there's also many things that are work in progress. And one of the things that started off as a work in progress and gradually we are getting right is the nature of relationships within our movement in spiritual culture. And one of the ways we got that right is by the establishment of the Grihastha Vision team. And two of those esteemed members are Uttama and Partha, who are disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And since the inception of this team, they have been traveling all over the world. Like those of you who were here when we were doing a little informal before the actual start of the program this morning, you always often see Partha put up on his Facebook status, where on earth is Uttama and Partha? Because they traveled that much. Recently, I think you were in some part of Europe, I can't remember. But you travel. And one of the things that we benefit from is the advice that you give. And one thing I would say that I am a better husband having taken that class 15 years ago. My wife would probably say I'm still a big work in progress, but I could have been much worse. So with that being said, I'll turn over to you, Uttama and Partha. Take us through this morning session. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Panchakalpatarvisya Kripasinduvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo
Vishnupadaya
Vishnupadaya
Krishna
Krishna
Prasthaya
Bhutale
Bhutale
Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Prasadesha Tarane Mukam Karoti
Vachalam
Vachalam
Pangam Langayate Giri Yat Kripatam Maham Vande Shigurum Dinataranam. So I'm understanding that a part of our audience is Bhakti Shastri class. Have they graduated?
No, not yet. We have one module to complete and start after these sessions in May.
Okay, so another work in progress.
Yeah. So what this is for the wider devotee community, not just the registered Shastri students.
So I'd like to congratulate the devotees who have taken the initiative to take the Bhakti Shastri course. Something Srila Prabhupada very much wanted was devotees to systematically read his books. And it's very, very important. And for those of you who may not have taken Bhakti Shastri, we very much hope that you're delving into Srila Prabhupada's books and trying to understand Srila Prabhupada's books to the best of your ability. And we've been asked to speak about something we generally end up talking about, which is about marriage and Krsna consciousness. And in one sense, it's very much related to Bhakti Shastri and the study of Srila Prabhupada's books. In reality, marriage, it's like a practicum. If you study to be a lawyer or a doctor or a dentist, you're going to get a practicum after, which is they're going to put you in a situation where you get to practice what you learned.
Under intense circumstances.
Yes, under intense circumstances. And so marriage is like that. It's an opportunity to learn how to live and apply the philosophy of Krishna consciousness in your life in very meaningful, practical ways. And so we would like to explore some ways, especially from Bhagavad Gita, how what we learn from Bhagavad Gita is very much applicable in our daily lives, whether it's in marriage or just our general relationships also. And a first very important topic in Bhagavad Gita that's very applicable to marriage is how Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is trying to instill in Arjuna a sense of duty. And we see how Arjuna, he was actually very reluctant to perform his duty. And Krishna went to great lengths to stress to him the importance of duty and not to be attached to the results, but to do his duty to the best of his ability and depend upon Krishna. And so how is that applicable to marriage? Generally in marriage, it begins in a stage where it looks something like everything's perfect, we are in heaven. There's kind of a euphoric stage when you first meet your partner, and there's a lot of romantic feelings and everything is very easy. And over time, that euphoric stage of marriage, it kind of dissipates. It's actually kind of a hormonal influence. Your body produces lots of endorphins like oxytocin, dopamine, which make you feel very good. But eventually that phase kind of diminishes and you're kind of left with your real selves, and you begin to notice that you have differences. And unfortunately, many couples, when they come to that stage, when the honeymoon stage ends and they begin to discover their differences, they get locked in kind of a power struggle trying to change each other. And at that point in marriage, the relationship can go one of three ways. They begin to discover their differences, and they both begin to think everything will be perfect if you change. And there's some things we can change and modify in our behaviors, but there's some things that are very integral to who we are as spiritual souls. And those are a part of just our being, and those things won't change. And so couples who get locked in trying to change the things that are unchangeable, they can go one of three ways. Either if they have a low level of commitment and a low level of skills and no support, they might spiral downward towards separation or divorce. If they have a high level of a commitment and a high level of a sense of duty to honor their marriage vows, but they have a low level of skills, they might remain together and maybe not so happily ever after. And I think Krishna expects more from that. So just like we see in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna instilled that sense of duty, but he also instilled them with knowledge of the absolute truth and knowledge of his nature and knowledge of the nature of the spirit soul and knowledge of how to control the mind and senses so that one can do one's duty in a very productive, meaningful, spiritual way. So we don't want to have commitment with no knowledge. We want to have that sense of commitment with knowledge and skills so we can learn to live together peacefully in Krishna consciousness. And so that's a very important point of Krishna consciousness, is that there will be challenges. We once lived in a community, a farm in the 1970s, and Prabhupada wrote a very nice letter. It was actually the letter in which Srila Prabhupada granted us our second initiation. And in that letter, Prabhupada, he had heard about the conditions on the farm and the location where we were, it was quite remote. There was quite severe winters, which you in Trinidad will have no idea what I'm talking about. And in this letter, Prabhupada, he described that in your community, Nugokula, he said, there will be many difficulties, many challenges. And he quoted the verse, Matas Pashastu Kuntiya Shitoshna Sukha Dukada Agama Payinoni Just Tam Titikshashva Bharata. That the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress come and go like the appearance and disappearance of the summer and winter seasons, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. And that letter was so prophetic because in that community, in that farm, in that location, so many things happened. It was like a tragic comedy in retrospect, not at the time. And but the devotees there, we learned that those many difficulties we had to tolerate, and the devotees who tolerated that, they actually made great spiritual advancement. So that's one very, very essential teaching of Bhagavad Gita, is that sense of duty, and not just duty in the sense of endlessly gritting one's teeth and bearing the pain, but the sense of duty with knowledge that we have a very important role to play in, Krishna's mission, fulfilling Srila Prabhupada's desires, and also with the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, so that we're not just gritting our teeth, but in a way that we can face those challenges in a way that strengthens our spiritual life, and it actually becomes meaningful and fulfilling despite the challenges.
People sometimes think that marriage is going to be easy, as my husband was saying. But the fact is, it's probably going to be one of your more difficult services in life. Because when you're very closely connected with someone, it kind of triggers your deep anartas in your heart. You can't hide them from that person, because we have more expectations for affectionate dealings. We have more expectations for a good relationship. And so when something happens that we don't meet those expectations, or it triggers some pain from the past, it's going to be more painful, and it's going to happen more often in relationships of marriage than just with casual acquaintances or even your other devotee friends. So we do have to be prepared for that. And it's good, because sometimes those deep anartas in our heart, that's the only way to showcase them, so that we can work on them and deal with them. So if we think of that Cinderella expectation that I'm going to, get married and live happily ever after, the reality is we're going to get married and we're going to begin the hard work of cleansing our anartas so that we can happily engage in the process of devotional service. So it's a warning, but it's good, because it's a opportunity to cleanse your heart very deeply. And so that's good. It's just the more skills you have to be able to do that, the easier your journey might be. So just like, excuse me, Arjuna, he's speaking to Krishna as his guru, and we're given advice that we must choose our gurus very carefully, to pick gurus that we can, who are very pure and can give us highly enlightened knowledge. So also, the partner that we choose in life is going to be one of our most important decisions, because it's who we're going to be, working through our anartas with. And it really makes a difference who you marry. It's forms the trajectory of your entire life. Are you going to live in a poor condition, a rich condition? Your kids are going to be very similar to the way the other person is. It's going to affect everything. So it's one of those decisions that we want to make very carefully. Did you want to add something?
I would also like to add that it's very important to understand that not a blade of grass moves without the will of Krishna. And Prabhupada described how Krishna was like a very expert artist. And he mentions this in the pastimes of Sanatan Goswami when he traveled through the forest of Jarikanda and he got this skin disease on his body and this itch, and he went to Jagannath Puri, and there's a whole pastime that occurs there. And Srila Prabhupada describes how Lord Chaitanya was like an artist, and just like an artist can utilize different colors in different ways to create a very beautiful picture. So in the same way, Krishna, he arranges situations for all of us to develop our spiritual qualities. And we can understand from Lord Chaitanya's teachings that several very important qualities that we need to develop in order to come to the platform of constantly chanting the holy name are to develop humility, tolerance, and patience. And so how will that come? Is it going to just come by some magical blessing that, like turning on a light switch, that all of a sudden one day we're going to be more tolerant than a tree and devoid of all sense of false prestige and just respectful to absolutely everyone? It doesn't actually happen that way, at least not according to my experience. Krishna, he arranges situations for us to develop patience. And as Uttama was saying, marriage and close relationships are like that. They become catalysts to actually practice humility and tolerance. One of our god sisters at Saranagati, one year she went to Mayapur for Gaur Pranim, and she was on the Navadvip Parikrama, traveling with this women's party. And there were small groups that would camp together and travel together. And she told us how every holy place she went, she was praying, my dear Lord, and praying to different acharyas and their samadhis and bhajan kutirs, that please bless me with the ability to be tolerant and humble. So that was, she was praying that everywhere she went. And then she said, all of a sudden, a new person entered into her little traveling group. And she said, this person was the most annoying, obnoxious person that she'd ever met. And she said, all of a sudden she was thinking, oh, Krishna, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, why is this happening to me? I've come here to Mayapur to make spiritual advancement, to have a good time, and this is going, I just can't understand it. And she said, all of a sudden, it just hit her that, oh my gosh, this is what I was praying for.
To develop tolerance.
I was praying to become tolerant, and here Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has fulfilled that by giving me an opportunity to develop tolerance. And she said that once she realized that, it became so much easier to actually practice that. So in relationships, in marriage, in those moments when you have challenges in your marriage, and it's an opportunity for you to practice patience and tolerance. And those of us in the audience here who have children, you will definitely learn when you have children that it's a great opportunity to develop tolerance. And so that's an important part of spiritual life, and a very, very, very practical way we can practice the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and make spiritual advancement in our ashrams.
So humility starts with being able to pause our point of view and listen respectfully to another person. So that ability to be able to listen to understand is a big part of humility. And we tend to be a little bit frantic to be understood first, because it's a huge need of a living entity to feel understood. And we have to understand it's also the same with our partner. So we find in dealing with couples that very often one person will say something, and communication's hard. It's very apt to go wrong. So we may not say it completely, we may say part of it, then our partner responds to the part that they heard that made something in their mind trigger, and go in that direction and respond and react. And sometimes we're not even reacting to what the other person's intending. And we get into this like downward spiral where each person's just overreacting to something the other person doesn't mean, doesn't intend, and has nothing to do with the situation. And you find yourself in this big argument and you can't figure out why. So practicing humility is when someone says something, maybe be humble. Am I understanding this correctly? Just pause for a second and check. So I'm understanding that you're upset about this and this, or, oh, I'm understanding you're hoping this is going to happen. No, not exactly. I was thinking we would go there first, not here first. And then you find out, oh, it's not exactly what I was thinking. You know how much time that little check-in can save? It can save a half-hour argument. It can save, it saves time just by being humble and realizing that I don't always understand everything correctly. And let me just double check it. That's one of the biggest tips, that couples can do, to just be able to stay peaceful and tranquil. Do you want to add?
No, just talk about another very, very important verse in the Bhagavad Gita, a seemingly small thing, but very important to understand. Krishna says, Yat karoshi yadashni yajtahoshi dadasya yat tapasya shikuntya tat kurishva madarpanam. He says, all you do, all you offer and give away in charity, you should do that as an offering to me. So what does the word all mean, and what does the word all exclude? Does the word all exclude anything? There's even one instance Prabhupada was talking about utilizing everything in Krishna's service, and he said even the alcoholic, he said his drinking is alcohol, and Prabhupada said if this man drinking this alcohol, if he can just think, well, there's water in this alcohol, and that water is the taste of that water in the alcohol is Krishna, Prabhupada said he'll make spiritual advancement. So all is absolute 100% inclusive. And sometimes we find that it's very common for householders in Krishna consciousness to sometimes think that my home, my ashram, it's something different than my Krishna consciousness. It's something different than my spiritual practices. And that misunderstanding can sometimes inhibit one's spiritual advancement. And even sometimes there can be some negative preaching about Krishna consciousness. Sometimes you might hear, well, about marriage, I'm sorry. That sometimes you might hear, well, marriage is like a deep, dark well, and the family is like jackals, and it's so entangling. And yes, that's true about household life that is devoid of the practice of Krishna consciousness. And that could become true even if we are devotees and we stop practicing Krishna consciousness, we could maybe fall a bit into that well. But if we practice our activities in our ashram, and as Krishna says, all those activities, if we do them as an offering to Krishna, then they become spiritualized. When I look at the screen here, I'm looking in the gallery view, and all of you are little boxes. Actually, I'm just going to take an opportunity. If you have the bandwidth, can you turn your cameras on? It's a little more personal if we can see you. So when I look at you in these little boxes, you look like bricks. And Prabhupada often talks about Varnashram and the importance of Varnashram and having this type of very organized society. So in order to build any structure, if you're building out of bricks, your foundational stones are very, very important. They have to be very strong because they carry the weight of that whole structure. If you build a building and the foundation stones start crumbling, you are going to have problems. We visited one city in Russia, Siberia, and there was many very, very old brick buildings there, and many of them, the foundational bricks in the foundation, they were crumbling. They weren't made properly. So you can imagine it'd be a little scary living in a building like that if the foundation is crumbling. So it's very essential to see grihastas have a very great responsibility because we are the foundation of that varnashram society. You're raising children to perpetuate the society. You are contributing to society, doing so much service for the society. So you are like the foundation that's holding up all the other ashrams. And so it's a very crucially important ashram. And it's essential to see that as a great responsibility. And if we can make that connection that, as Prabhupada said, he said, whatever one does, he should see, I am doing this on the order of my spiritual master. And Prabhupada, he said once that, well, his exact words, we need many examples of sane grihastas in the Krishna consciousness movement. I think he'd seen maybe too many divorces and too many problems. So he said, we need many sane examples. And so that's an instruction of Srila Prabhupada. He wants us to become exemplary. And within the instructions of the spiritual master, there's actually a great potency. We had the opportunity just last March to visit Danga, where Srila Prabhupada met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and received that instruction from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to spread Krishna consciousness in the English language. And that one instruction from that location manifest as this Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. There was such great power in that instruction that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gave to Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada commented once that when one attempts to please the spiritual master by his service, he said one can accomplish more than he or she can by one's own ability. So by seeing something that I'm doing this for the satisfaction of my guru, for Srila Prabhupada's mission, Krishna can empower you beyond your own ability. And I think that's very true for grihastas. If we see this, we have a very sacred responsibility to make our ashrams the best we can, and Krishna can actually help us. And sometimes it may seem, well, I'm just a little householder living in my house with my kids, and I seem so far removed from the preaching movement. It may seem that way, but you are being watched by your neighbors, your friends, people you work with, and they're seeing that there's something about this person that's different. I remember one very vivid example in Canada many years ago. This was in the 70s. We used to do Harinam in a big park in Vancouver, international tourist attraction. We're doing Harinam, sitting down, distributing prasadam, big circle of people watching, and we would sell books to people watching. And there was one lady there. I went to sell her Bhagavad Gita, and she just went, I don't want this. So I just backed off. She was like an electric fence. And so some of the small children were there, and they were just dancing in front of the devotees doing kirtan. And 10 minutes later, this lady called me over, and she indicated she wanted to talk to me, and I came, and she said, I'm from Russia. I think she worked at the embassy in Vancouver. And she said, I was told you people were a dangerous cult. And she said, but I can see how spontaneously these little children are taking to this process. There's something very real here. She said, I want to buy that book of yours And I'm going to take it back to Russia and tell all my friends about this. So how did that book make it to Russia? Just because of these little kids were happy in Krishna consciousness, being brought up by their parents and a community of devotees. So there's things going on in ways we can't imagine from our so-called simple activities in Krishna consciousness. So it is very important to understand that Krishna says, all you do means everything, and to do everything you do with devotion and attention. That's very important.
So Krishna talks a lot in the Bhagavad Gita about the three modes of material nature.
Talk about charity speech.
And I was just listening the other day, and Prabhupada made a comment that the three modes of material nature, they interfere with our relationship with Krishna. So you can imagine if it's interfering with our relationship with Krishna, it's also interfering with our relationship with each other. So we have to be very careful to moderate our emotions and our behaviors with each other when we're in the modes of passion and ignorance, because it ends up with a lot of detrimental interactions. And, our kids pick up on it, and our kids, they grow by seeing how we emotionally regulate. That's how they learn to regulate their emotions. So when we're relating to each other, we need to learn how to relate in the mode of goodness. And Srila Prabhupada says that, austerity of speech is to speak words in the mode of goodness, which are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, not agitating to others. And we know how hard that is when we get triggered in a way that we feel our needs are not going to get met, or we don't feel safe. So when somehow or other we have an interaction and we feel a little hurt, we feel a little distanced, we feel like this isn't working for me, we can respond more in the modes of passion and ignorance. And unfortunately, when we respond out of passion and ignorance, we can get a little bit escalated in our behaviors. And the problem with that is it triggers adrenaline and cortisol to run through our body. And when adrenaline and cortisol are in too large amounts, it floods the part of our brain that is rational and intelligent and chooses our words wisely, lets us think of a good response, a good reaction. And our higher self is now under the control of our lower self. And so we are speaking and acting in ways which aren't conducive to good relationships, what to speak of advancing Krishna consciousness. So being able to catch ourselves a little bit quicker when we head to those modes of passion and ignorance, take a breath, calm ourselves. That can help to keep our higher intelligence online. And then our higher self will start to release GABA and soothing things so that we can stay a little bit more in the mode of goodness and have better interactions. So we always advise couples, when we get a little bit overwhelmed by passion or ignorance and are not able to think properly, that's the time to use Canadian duct tape, that very wide gray tape that sticks really well. Don't say another word, zip your mouth, take a little space, go somewhere, take some deep breaths, relax yourself, chant Hare Krishna, listen to a lecture, go for a walk, do something until you can get back into your higher self. Then you can come back and have an interaction that's more in the mode of goodness and will be more conducive to having good relationships and actually accomplishing what you want to accomplish. So one of the biggest tips that we can suggest to couples is if either one of you is getting a little bit escalated, learn to take a break and let the other person take a break if they need it. Because that's a responsible decision. They're not abandoning you that we have to work this out. Don't leave me. It doesn't work. Allow yourselves to take that break, get in a good space, and then come back and respectfully work out what you need to work out.
We often have couples tell us that that's a real game changer for them, understanding that, realizing how you can get flooded and lose touch with your higher self. And you see how even in Mahabharata, and you see the Kshatriyas sometimes, or Ramayana, before they go into battle, they're insulting their opponent on the other side. You're just like the urine of a dog. Because they're trying to get him angry, because if they get angry, they make bad decisions. So you want to avoid anger. And Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita, Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha. You have to become free from attachment, fear, and anger. And he refers to anger as a demoniac quality, because you lose touch with your rational part of your brain. And as Uttama was saying, you don't want to speak from that platform, because that's when you start to make offenses. And incidentally, your spouse is actually a devotee, and you can make Vaishnava aparad when you flip your lid and say those kind of things. And what happens when we say flip your lid, you lose touch with that intelligence which comes from your heart. You lose touch with that. So it's very important to develop that kind of emotional regulation. And again, that's an extremely important part of spiritual life. And Krishna talks about that in the 6th chapter, how you have to control the lower self by the higher self, and how your mind can be your friend. It can also be your enemy. So there's very practical ways you can apply Bhagavad Gita. And it's very important to understand these things, with great detail. And it's just like especially Bhakti Shastra, sometimes you can get a little absorbed in memorizing and understanding the sequences of things and philosophical things. But at the same time, it's very important when you're reading and studying to think, how can I apply this in my life in a practical way? What gem is there here that I can hold close to my heart to help me advance in spiritual life, and that I can also use to help others? And it's very important to put that element of understanding into your study of Prabhupada's books.
So many of you may have children, and it's really important to understand the relationship between the higher self and between the part of your brain that does all the rational thinking and the part of your brain that is going for safety and self-preservation. So children, they're naturally born, they're the intelligence that they have is geared to keeping them safe and alive. So we know that, if a baby needs something, they usually cry. So when a baby cries, the mom, looks in the diaper. No, it's not that problem. What time is it? Oh, they're probably hungry. Oh, they need to sleep, right? We find some way to satisfy that bodily need so that they can be comfortable and get back to a happy state. So with children, the part of their brain that they're always trying to keep them safe. That's just the way the human beings, made, because we need to be able to stay alive. So your higher intelligence gradually develops as you age. And nowadays, I think it's about 26 before all the nerve endings in your higher intelligent brain are myelinated, or whatever the word is, with it, they're all there, that we can think rationally and objectively. So children have to learn that, how to, utilize their intelligence and not just act from their impulses. But they learn that by their parents, um, what's the word? Demonstrating it, and by their parents helping them to learn how to regulate their emotions. So in order to regulate our emotions, we need to be in a calm state. So usually when children are misbehaving, or when even adults are not acting in their best interest, and maybe misbehaving, it's because we have a need that's not being met. And when our needs are not being met, we tend to get a little bit triggered or frantic. So when a child is misbehaving, it's not because they don't want to behave. Children will behave if they can. It's because they're upset about something, tired, hungry, whatever. So the first thing that a parent should do is try to see what is the need that isn't being met. So if the kid's like upset and not wanting to eat, maybe it's because, the brother, smashed their car, their toy car or something like that. So they're not going to be able to just forget about it and sit down and eat their dinner. You need to find with your child what is a particular thing that soothes your child so they can become calm enough to rationally think. So for some kids, it might be, giving them a hug. Some it might be sitting beside, some it might be singing to them, letting them, sit by themselves for a while. Each kid's going to be different. We got to figure out what that is. And we also need to figure out what it is in us that calms us. Because when we become escalated over our child becoming escalated, neither one of us is going to calm down. So first of all, as a parent, we need to get to a mode of goodness, calm state, taking a few breaths, getting ourselves centered. Then we can help the child calm down. Then when the child is calm, we can help them to engage in the activities that are beneficial or that they need to do, eat their dinner, take their bath, clean their room, do whatever it is, that they need to be doing. So when we understand how the brain works, we can work with it to stay more in the mode of goodness and come to our higher selves. And that's a big thing that parents need to teach kids, that we need to understand between ourselves as couples, so that we can have relationships in the mode of goodness.
That's the yoga of parenting. The yoga of parenting. And another way to make spiritual advancement in the Grihastha ashram. And Uttama is mentioning the modes of material nature. And that chapter in chapter 14 in Bhagavad Gita is actually a very important chapter. And Krishna, he says, Arjuna, I'm going to tell you the supreme wisdom that all the sages in the past attained perfection by understanding. And that supreme wisdom is this understanding of the interaction of the modes of material nature. And so Uttama was explaining how, it's not always easy to come to the mode of goodness, and it's very easy to get influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance. And we can understand psychologically and physiologically how we get in those lower modes. We just lose touch with our higher intelligence and our spiritual knowledge. So it's very important to regulate those modes. So Prabhupada explains in the 14th chapter how Krishna, his nature is Shuddha Sattva. It's pure goodness. And to actually attain Krishna, we have to attain a nature like Krishna's. We have to come to that platform of pure goodness. But the challenge is, as explained in the 14th chapter, the modes of material nature, they're always competing for supremacy and just pulling us this way and that way and pushing us And we all experience that. It's a challenge. It's a challenge to come to the mode of goodness. And it's a challenge even to remember to come to the mode of goodness. And so it's very difficult. And there's a very key thing that Srila Prabhupada states in one verse in the 14th chapter, and it's that by practice, one can develop the mode of goodness. By practice. I was just reading, Prabhupada was talking about rising early. And Prabhupada was saying that someone asked, well, Prabhupada, how can you rise early? And Prabhupada said, by practice. You practice getting a little earlier. And he gave this example. Prabhupada was saying, he said, just like there's some man, he can run 10 miles. And Prabhupada said, I could barely run 1 mile. And I was surprised Prabhupada saying that. He's like 70 years old. He said, I could run 1 mile, but my heart will be palpitating. But he said, by practice, you learn to run more. So the modes are pulling us, but if we practice learning to see, okay, I'm slipping into the mode of passion, ignorance here. What spiritual knowledge can I apply that's going to help me come to goodness? Then we gradually come to the mode of goodness. And in that way, we make spiritual advancement. And again, that is how we make spiritual advancement in these different situations that arise in our daily lives, with our children, with our spouses. It's an opportunity to practice moving towards the mode of goodness. And just like today, many people have these things, a smartwatch. It can tell you your pulse, the amount of oxygen in your blood, and how many calories you burned. And actually, there's one practical thing you can do if you were wearing a smartwatch, which can give you your pulse rate, and you're having an argument with your spouse, your kids are getting a little unruly, and you have to deal with them. If you checked your smartwatch, and if your pulse is exceeding 100 beats a minute
per minute,
100 beats per minute, that's the point where you disconnect with your higher intelligence. That's the point where you disconnect. So sometimes I used to think that, well, if you had some kind of meter, a watch that, okay, am I in good? It would show, are you in goodness, passion, or ignorance?
They do now.
They do have one. Just check your pulse. That will help. But also, if you can learn those symptoms, and Krishna talks about that in Bhagavad Gita, how he explains how in all activities, the modes of material nature are prevalent. And he explains like charity in the mode of goodness, austerity in the mode of goodness, passion, ignorance. He gives many different examples. And so we can actually learn to become attentive to see, how these modes are influencing us, and make that practice by concerted effort and our study and application of Bhagavad Gita and Srila Prabhupada's books to come to a more elevated state of consciousness. And that's how we make spiritual advancement.
Personally, I find that hearing is one of the ways that I connect very well with Krishna. And Krishna says, if you want to get a nature like me, you hear about me. And then you gain Krishna's, nature. So the more we can hear about Krishna and develop that affection for Krishna, we'll develop that intelligence that we can apply what we learn in the philosophy in our everyday life. And so we actually haven't, studying Bhakti Shastri should improve your marital relationships because you should be able to come to the mode of goodness where you can make good decisions on how we're going to interact with each other. And if it's not happening, then somehow or other, we have to look inside and see, is there some anartha that I'm having that's blocking me in my ability to practically apply Krishna consciousness. And still, one of the cures is by more hearing. We don't want to give up our hearing because that connects us in such a way that it purifies our heart. We do need to be honest and see if we have some anarthas that we need help with that are blocking our progress in Krishna consciousness. And those are going to show up when you're in an intimate relationship with someone else, and you're going to be able to work on them. So we shouldn't be afraid about getting some help, some guidance. We always say we want to go to, senior devotees. Sometimes our anarthas are specialists. We might need to, take a little help from a therapist. Whatever it is, it's not wrong to need help, because those anarthas are deep within our hearts. And taking help to remove those anarthas, just like we take help by going to Bhakti Shastri classes, somehow or other, we want to cleanse our heart so that our hearts can be a nice clean place that Krishna can come and sit down, and we can have that relationship with Krishna without that interference from the modes of material nature.
A question just popped in. Someone was asking, does having a higher IQ help one to be able to do these kind of things, have better relationships, and control the mind? Not necessarily, because intelligence, it doesn't really come from the brain. Spiritual intelligence really comes from the heart. And Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita how to those who are devoted, I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. So that real intelligence, our spiritual intelligence, it doesn't really come from having a high IQ. It comes from having a very high sense of spiritual intelligence. And so it's very important to see that we have to concentrate on the aspect of bhakti, because Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna that, for those who are devoted, for them, I preserve what they have and I carry what they lack. So you might even lack the material intelligence, but if you have that devotion, Krishna can empower you with spiritual intelligence to be able to do things that are seemingly impossible. So that's, again, very important to see. What we're trying to do is use that spiritual knowledge to manifest bhakti in our lives. And the more we do that, the more intelligence, spiritual intelligence, we'll be able to develop how to do that. Just say one other thing about, Krishna talks about surrender. The conclusion of Bhagavad Gita is also very important. And, again, Krishna says, I'm going to give you the supreme wisdom, Arjuna. And he says, just surrender to me utterly. What is it? I forgot the verse. He said, just surrender unto me utterly. And then he tells Arjuna, after saying that you should surrender utterly, he says, now you deliberate on this fully and then do as you wish to do. Vimre she shena ashe shena yatechasi yatagru. He just explained the whole Bhagavad Gita, says, Arjuna, surrender utterly, then do what you want. So Krishna's not forcing you to surrender. He wants you to think about it. And Prabhupada describes that in the purport. The best way to surrender to Krishna is to think about everything, in your life, the situations, as fully as possible, how you can apply the philosophy, what's practical, and then by your own choice, do as you wish to do. Devotional service is something voluntary. It comes from the heart. So Krishna says that surrender utterly, but think about it and do as you wish to do. And then Krishna explains, again, he says the most supreme wisdom is to always think of me and become my devotee. It's a very simple thing. And then he says, just abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me, and I will protect you. Do not fear. So we need to have that kind of commitment to understand the goal is to surrender to Krishna and be dependent upon Krishna in all activities. And Krishna is not forcing us. He wants us to do that out of love, according to our own choice. And then once we make that choice, we can think of Krishna and depend upon Krishna, and he will actually help us and protect us. And so again, Krishna is arranging situations in all of our lives, whether you're married or single or going to get married or not going to get married. Krishna is arranging situations to help us develop these spiritual qualities, humility, tolerance, and patience and compassion. And we can do that by minutely studying Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Ishopanishad, all Srila Prabhupada's books, and continually thinking, okay, how can I apply this wisdom in my life practically in a way that's going to help me and also enable me to help others? Do you want to say something more?
No.
So maybe if anyone has any questions, we can open it up for questions now.
If anyone has any question, they can either type it in the chat or you can.
We're not hearing you, Shanta Vigraha. I don't know why.
Are you hearing me now? I wonder. Am I audible now?
And we're not hearing anyone. I think Paramatma is speaking, which also
No,
we're
he's not. He's muted.
Oh, he's been.
Let me just.
We can look in the chat here.
Oh, Hare Krishna, I think the host has activated that unmute button.
You're audible now, Paramatma. You can go ahead.
All right. I'd like
You're
to.
still muted there, Shanta Vigraha.
Can I go ahead and ask a question, please? I'm not getting the cue.
Yes, Paramatma Prabhu. Go ahead.
Oh, he can hear Shanta Vigraha.
Hmm.
Oh,
Mataji and Prabhu, Uttama, Mataji and Partha Prabhu, are you hearing me? I'm just.
Don't know why we're not hearing. You just check my settings.
it's muted.
No, he wasn't muted before.
Shanta Vigraha, they are not hearing me. Although you might be hearing and
see it's
probably
muted.
others for one reason or other.
For some reason, we're not hearing anyone right now.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram,
It's not the
Hare Hare.
volume.
Microphone's up.
Shanta, are you hearing me, Prabhu? Mataji and Prabhu certainly are not hearing me.
I'm hearing. I just put a message in the chat for others to indicate.
They are
It's
not hearing.
the volume. I mean, I can
They're-
see your
For those of you who have your camera on, if you can hear us, put your thumb up. Okay.
Okay, so
And
now Shanta Vigraha, can you say something? I don't hear you.
Hare Krishna.
No.
you're hearing Santa Vigraha.
Yeah, but we don't. That is so weird.
Can someone else turn their mic and just say something?
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna,
Am I
Hare
not hearing
Krishna.
It's strange. We're not hearing anyone. That's very
Ram Ram,
unusual.
Hare Hare.
Very unusual. The audio is on.
Audio's on.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna.
Yes, I could hear.
Did we go out
I
and
could
come
hear
back
you,
in?
Mataji.
I don't know.
I could hear Pavitra Mataji. I could
Suggestion?
hear
It's
Shanta
not
Vigraha,
the.
but seems like Mataji and Prabhu are not hearing me.
I guess we could just take questions
There's
from
one
the
there.
chat.
This thing hurt caused by some.
Yeah, our volume is up. Okay. Someone's asking, Deborah Bard is asking, how does one deal with profound, devastating hurt caused by the action of one's spouse? I guess that depends upon what the definition of profound, devastating hurt is.
Still have to deal with it.
Pardon?
Still have to deal with it either way.
Yeah. Sometimes words can be very painful. And also sometimes in relationships, there can be a pattern of continued negative interactions. And every time you have a negative interaction, it kind of accumulates. There's a phenomenon they call emotional bank account in psychology. And every time you have a positive exchange with someone, it's like making a deposit in the emotional bank account of your relationship. Every time you have a negative exchange, it's like making a withdrawal from that bank account. So if you had $100,000 in your bank account, and if you took out 100, the difference, it's not very profound, it's not very noticeable. If you only had $500 in your bank account and you took out 100, that's going to seem very profound. It's going to have quite an impact. So couples who have a low level of positive interactions in the relationship and a higher level of negative interactions, then those kind of negative interactions, they feel a lot more painful and they hurt a lot worse. And actually, if couples, they have if their relationship, if they have less than 5 positive interactions to 1 negative, the relationship is going to be very difficult and could head towards divorce or separation. A healthy marriage will be 20 positive to 1 negative, 50 positive to 1 negative. So it's very important for couples to develop a habit of having positive exchanges. So again, if you're not cultivating the positive exchanges, the negative exchanges are going to seem amplified. So that's one thing, is how to deal with it, is to cultivate positive relationships.
I could say so.
An extreme example of that would be possibly if there is, say, emotional abuse, which is a completely different thing, which is beyond the scope of giving a very brief answer. But in essence, we want to develop a culture of appreciation and gratitude within our relationships, and to express those things. And that way you kind of avoid those kind of impactful negative exchanges.
So when we have like really devastating hurts, we actually need to be able to, sorry, why don't we just unplug that?
Yeah.
Should I plug it?
Just 1 second.
Battery 90%.
Sorry.
Dr. Vicar, can you just say one thing? I just tried one thing here.
No, it's
Hare Krishna.
There we go.
Okay,
Somehow
all right.
our speaker actually got turned off somehow.
okay, there we go. So profound hurts, we have to go inside and actually offer love and kindness to ourselves, because really having that self-love and soothing yourself inside that, I am lovable, I am a good person, I am eternal servant of Krishna, Krishna loves me no matter what. We have to come to the place within ourselves where we feel worth. And so sometimes those hurts, they take away that feeling of self-worth from us. And that's not a quick journey, but it's something that we have to give ourselves. It's not that the other person can actually take away that sense of value from us. And when we realize that, that can help to ease the hurt. Sometimes we might need the help of a trained professional to maybe help us get over those hurts, because it's hard to access that place in our heart where we can feel peaceful with all those hurts. So if you're in that space, my heart goes out to you because it's a really painful place to be in. Ultimately, though, we have to, heal ourselves, because there isn't a lot we can do about what the other person has done to us. But we have to come to that place within ourselves where we feel worthy, understanding that our value in the eyes of Krishna and within ourselves. So I think that's probably all I can say on that. So we have a question. Is the wife equal to the man in terms of modern emancipation?
That's a very interesting topic.
You better be careful how you answer this, Prabhu.
So we understand we have spiritual equality, and at the same time there is a material difference. And it's very interesting in Srila Prabhupada's books. You'll find many seemingly opposing statements. How you'll find that women are less intelligent, and you'll also find Krishna saying in Bhagavad Gita how amongst women I am intelligence. So there's these contradictions. How do I understand these contradictions? There's a wonderful contradiction where Prabhupada says, after 50, every man should take sannyas. In another place, Prabhupada says, in the age of Kali Yuga, no one should take sannyas. So those two statements are same canto, same chapter, same purport, same paragraph. And Prabhupada qualifies it. He says, if one has the nature and ability, then he should take sannyas. So how do we understand these statements about women are less intelligent? Actually, Uttama gave a class on one of those verses in Slovenia. Very, very good class. And one man came up to her after and said, that was the most intelligent class I've heard by an unintelligent woman.
He said, I don't mean it that way. He said, I mean about unintelligence of women.
And so women need to be protected. They have a more emotional nature, and sometimes men can help women balance that emotional nature. And also women can help men also not be so cold-hearted by their emotional natures. And so it's very important to, regarding that subject, to understand it properly and those statements properly, because Bhagavatam begins by second verse by stating this knowledge of the Bhagavatam is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. And we understand how Varnashram actually became degraded because people used the knowledge of the Vedas and the knowledge of Varnashram to have one section of society lord it over the other sections of society, to control and manipulate, and the whole system of Varnashram became degraded. And suddenly this knowledge of the difference between male and female natures and psychology, if we misuse that as men to lord it over women, we've missed the whole essence of bhakti. And so again, it's very important to understand the essence. And there's a very interesting article that appeared in a Harmonist magazine, which is attributed to Srila Bhaktisaranta Saraswati Thakur. And he describes that when seeking a partner, both the man and the woman should only accept someone who they see as a better servant of the Lord than themselves. So how do you do that? You both have to find someone who's more advanced. That's impossible. So we can understand from that both the man and the woman have to have this mutual humility. And the article describes that neither the man or the woman have any right or sense of proprietorship over the service or the property of the other. Neither can demand service from the other, and neither can impose their service upon the other. So in one sense, it appears to be presenting almost an egalitarian sense of marriage. But we can understand that that's Bhaktisiddhanta in that article is talking about the spiritual platform. And it's interesting in that article, it concludes by saying how this system of Vaishnava marriage has its origin in the worship of the household deity. So just across from us, we have Sri Sri Gornatai. They're the boss of our house. I'm not the boss. She's not the boss. They're the boss. And we are meant to work together in harmony to satisfy the boss of the house, the household deity. And so that is actually Vedic marriage. So in terms of male-female psychology and in terms of the Vedic understanding, there are differences between male and female natures and male and female intelligence, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the man is more intelligent.
Right.
It means that women, sometimes they need help regulating their emotions. As, I mean, Uttama was explaining sometimes that women tend to be more swayed by emotions. And so in that sense, they may lose their higher intelligence. So men and women can work together in that way. But I would answer that question very briefly by saying, again, the goal in understanding those kind of contradictions and applying those things, it's not how I can lord it over someone, but it's how I can use those statements and that knowledge to help everyone advance in Krishna consciousness.
You know, I found it interesting. I did a big database search to see Prabhupada's use of the word patriarchy. Prabhupada almost never uses it. So we don't have a patriarchal, Vaishnavism isn't patriarchal. Patriarchy means one segment has all the power and the other has none. That's how we came in this material world. We want to lord it over and have the power. That doesn't mean to say that men shouldn't lead, they shouldn't take responsibility, that men and women don't work harmoniously together. One person leads, the other person works cooperatively. Those things are done in the mode of goodness. It's not patriarchy where I'm the boss, my needs are the only thing that counts, and your needs don't matter at all. That's how you, part of the reason that you know, the women's emancipation came up is because their needs were never met. Whereas we see in Vedic culture that, you know, Draupadi just, you know, wanted a lotus flower. And so, you know, Bhima was like climbing the mountain to get it for her. You know, like we work together and we see each other's needs. That's not patriarchy, that's teamship, where one person leads well and the other person cooperates. So it depends upon the mood in which it's done. So I see that when we are Vaishnavas and we try to you know, see that the other person's needs are met, that they're happy, that we're working together as a team, that's when it works well together. And we don't have to need this emancipation or any of these things. We just, you know, work as a team, take responsibility, and all goes well.
There's actually two questions about astrology, and a lot of devotees are using astrology now. And I think it's Parma or Poo, it was saying that sometimes devotees, if the chart is very favorable, they might take that as a cue that, well, we're going to have the perfect marriage. And
Cinderella syndrome.
And he's making the point how, you know, if the spiritual practice isn't there, even the good chart can have problems. And that's very true. We have a very good friend in Mayapur, very expert astrologer. She studied astrology for 10 years. And she said her observation was she has seen couples with a very, very high degree of compatibility in their chart who had terrible marriages and who divorced. And she's also seen the opposite, that couples who did not have such great charts, they're still together after 30 years and they're getting along well. So why is that? And she made this point that it's not your chart, it's what you do with it. It's what you do with that chart. And as Paramama is pointing out, that it's very important to have that very strong spiritual practice, because even you have a good chart, there is going to be challenges and obstacles and difficulties. And if you don't have the spiritual strength and the skills to navigate the inevitable storms that come, you will have difficulties. So just like today, we're going to have a save a day for our Rath Yatra, getting the site ready, and there's rain in the forecast, 40% chance of rain. So maybe we should cancel it. But no, it's only 40%. We're going to go out there. Maybe I'll take a coat and a hat, and we're going to prepare for it. So you're going to have a chart, and a good chart, again, it doesn't mean you're not going to have to do some work and you're not going to have to apply the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna, he is going to arrange that. It's 100% guaranteed. And even if the chart has challenges, you can prepare by getting spiritual knowledge. So I would say, especially with astrology, if couples are using that, and we recommend, get some charts, but do more than one. And unless, if you have more than one astrologer say this is a very incompatible chart, in that situation, a couple might want to seriously, examine, is this going to be too much work for us? And generally, astrology, it's again, it's like the weather. It may rain, it may not, and astrology is not 100% accurate.
But it's worth looking at.
Yeah.
Because over the years, when I look back and I see devotees that married, even though the chart wasn't that great, most of them had quite a bit of difficulties, and not too many of them are together. So, I think you might, it's worth looking at. But you still have to do the work either way. I guess that's my answer. Shanta Vigara, your hand's up.
My question is sort of along the lines of what Paramatma asked. Like we see, like even in our context is a devotional one as practitioners of bhakti, and we see marriages even amongst those who are not devotees sometimes are very exemplary in terms of the way the couple deal with the each other and children and whatnot. And we see sometimes amongst our devotee community marriages which may not be so exemplary. And like sort of the question that comes to mind, like Srila Prabhupada, he makes a very interesting statement in the early chapters of Bhagavad Gita, I think either early chapter 3 or somewhere. He says that Arjuna, he sort of wanted to avoid doing his duty by using Krsna consciousness as an excuse. So my question in this regard is, sometimes as married people, we have issues and we definitely want to live a spiritual life. And we may take that time off to go and chant our rounds, to go and hear more. But does that absolve us of actually dealing with the issue that we have?
Nope. And you're not going to be able to avoid dealing with the issue, because
you do need to take that time to chant. You do need to take that time and read. Well, that's crucially important. But you have to absorb that chanting and absorb that hearing, and then go out and do your duty of being a dutiful grahasta and learning how to work together in peace and harmony in Krishna consciousness. And that's work. That's a lot of work. But we have to do that and have to take that responsibility. And like you're saying, sometimes we want to avoid the responsibility by thinking, oh, I'm just going to go and chant and forget about my problems.
Avoidance doesn't work. So if you tend to be an avoidant person, you really need to try to tackle some things head on. It's going to be scary, but if you do it with calm words and in a respectful way, bring up the challenges or listen to your wife's complaints, not being defensive, trying to understand what it is, what you can take responsibility for, what you can change. That's going to go a long way to improving your marriage, because it's just not going to improve by ignoring it. And just by chanting Hare Krishna. We chant Hare Krishna so we get intelligence to know how to act. Krishna was saying to Arjuna, he just wanted to go off and, go in the forest. He says, armchair philosophy doesn't work. You actually have to apply it. So avoidance is one of the major causes of marital breakup. You have to deal with your problems. And when you deal with them, you're going to learn something about yourself. You're going to learn something about the other person, and you're going to grow. It's not that it's going to be that bad in the end. You just have to do it in a mode of goodness way so that you can actually deal with it.
We just finished working with a couple who were a bit like that. They were quite conflicted. And he started out by saying, well, isn't it better just to live separately? And I'll just think about my spiritual life. It's going to be easier, and concentrate on my spiritual life and my devotional service outside my marriage. And that'll be easier and things will be better. And so he was just kind of willing to let the marriage fall apart. And so we just ended up teaching them about, this phenomena of escalation and how important it is to develop that emotional regulation so you can de-escalate, so you can deal with the challenges. And we just taught them some simple communication skills, how to actually listen to and actually hear each other, and taught them how to
only speak when they're regulated,
and how to have a format to constructively and non-confrontationally deal with their challenges. And they had a very big breakthrough, and they ended up being very happy and confident that they could, they knew they were still going to have challenges, but they knew they could face them and face each other in those challenges, with respect and love and devotion. And so it is important to face those things in healthy spiritual ways, and they can be learned, and it's important to learn them.
There's a question here about what does the husband do when the wife is nagging and sometimes negative. So I'll tell you what my husband does. See, we nag because we're worried about something. We're not seeing how it's going to, it's not working the way it is, and that's stressing us out. And so we're getting in a negative state of mind. And so we tend to say it negatively because there's some need that we have that we're not able to deal with. So when I get like that, my husband says to me, could you rephrase that in a way that's easier for me to hear? So one of the skills that we try to teach couples is, when I have a complaint, to rephrase it as a request. Just say the same things, but ask for what you need. Because most of the time, they have no idea we need what we need. We didn't say it. And we're upset that they didn't give us what we never asked for. So instead of saying, it's such a mess, you just leave your dishes everywhere and you expect me to clean up after you. And okay, why don't you ever put your dishes in the sink, or why don't you ever wash your plate? Okay, that's not going to work. We could just request, if when you're finished eating, you could take your plate and wash it, then it really helps me when I come with the kids to do the homework and I don't see this big mess, and it would really be a big help to me. Okay, that's way easier to hear than the first thing. So
austerity of speech. It talks about that in Bhagavad Gita. Austerity of speech, a simple thing. Because when you complain, when you nag, and men do it too, but generally my wife admits ladies do it more. When you complain, especially for men to hear complaint, right from the start we feel like we've failed, because it starts off, the conversation starts off, she's very unhappy, and I made her unhappy. So we automatically start feeling like a failure, and it tends to make men withdraw, and it's very hard for men to respond to that. But as Uttama was saying, if the lady can say in a respectful way, can you do this? And if she explains how it adds value to her life, then I can say, oh, here's a way I can make her happy. Here's a way I can serve her. Or at least I can negotiate some solution to that dilemma. It just changes the whole dynamic when you say what you need with respect. And so again, that's practicing the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, austerity of speech, mind control, self-regulation. It just makes life so much more spiritual.
So we have a question on balance. You know, sometimes our services take a lot of time and maybe we don't have enough time for the family. So, you know, do we neglect the family? Do we neglect the service? Neither. Maybe we can pray to Krishna how I can balance this out. So, you know, it's not the time and the place for me to say, you know, all the things you could be doing to do it better. But just to give suggestions is maybe we can ask someone to do a little part of our service and we don't have to do it all. And we can get a little bit of help. And I know, you know, we're short of manpower, but sometimes there's congregation members who can do a little bit of the, you know, some of the part of the service. And that, you know, frees up some time that we can spend more time with the family. And so I think we do need to learn how to be maybe a bit more efficient in what we do. But really the bottom line is I only have this much time for my service and I need to get it done in this much time. If it's not quite done, maybe some of it has to wait till another day. We don't have to finish everything every day. Because it's important that we spend some time with our family. It's important that we spend time chanting. So we do have to balance it all. And sometimes it's a matter of just divvying up what hours are spent on what. You know, I'm going to spend this 2 hours chanting, you know, and I'm going to spend this time with my family, and I'm going to spend this much time with my service. We only have so many hours in the day. And so don't neglect the things that are important, because just doing service is not enough. We had an interesting example of one of our initiating gurus back in the beginning of the movement. And people were coming to him and saying, "Are you chanting your rounds?" "I'm doing well, I'm doing well." And later on, he wasn't having enough time to chant his rounds. And he came back to devotional service and someone said, "What happened?" He said, "I thought devotional service was enough, that the devotional service would carry me. But," he said, "I realized that I actually can't neglect the other parts of my life either." So we have to find that balance. It's important. Yes, service is important, but it's not the only thing. If we don't have time to also chant, and if we don't have good relationships, because, you know, Prabhupada says that spiritual advancement is, you know, like 80% association. We have to have good relationships also. So we need to balance that out.
And again, it's very important for both parents to spend time with children.
Yes, Shanta Vigraha.
Yeah, because we don't want to, you know, we're so focused on service and preaching, and then, we leave our body and they're giving eulogies at our funeral, and the children are saying, "Well, my dad, he was a great devotee. He made lots of devotees, but he didn't really care about us." We don't want that kind of scenario. We want our children to feel they're very valued, and they're also a very important part of our service. And as a community, we need to do that. We need to build programs for youth so they actually feel included. We visited one location where they said, like, no, there's no teenagers involved at all, and they're just not interested at all in Krishna consciousness. And But at the same time, the practice there was that even small children, like 10, small children were just left at home when the children went to the temple.
The parents.
The parents were at the temple. The children were just left at home by themselves. And then they're wondering why they're not taken to Krishna consciousness. But you have to engage them in Krishna consciousness, and you actually have to give them that quality time.
One time, one lady, she said, maybe I should, give my kid to somebody else because I'm doing important pujari work. And Prabhupada said, no, your child is your deity. You must spend time to raise them well. And, we see that, the, they call them the formative years. We really need to spend a lot of time with our kids. In quality time, because that's how they learn. Self-regulation is learned by interaction with the parents. Most of what we learn is by how we interact. So it is a huge service to Krishna and even to humanity to spend some time raising your children well, because we see that all these atrocious things that adults do, when you look back, you usually see they have some kind of a traumatic childhood. And that's why they're acting out in all these horrible ways in their adult lives. So we have a responsibility to raise children that are going to be, give good input into society. What to speak of developing their Krishna consciousness and being able to go back home, back to Godhead. So it's definitely a huge service to have, spend quality time with your kids to raise them well.
And, even children that aren't your direct children, it's also important that, to give them some attention also. I used to make it a point to, sometimes play soccer with the kids in the community and talk to them. And there was one of those children who's probably 40 something now. He came up to me once a few years ago, and he said, Partha, he said, when I was a kid, he said, you were the only one who treated me like a human being. That was kind of a real eye opener for me. That it's so important that, sometimes we have to come down to the level of the kids, to play some ball with them or something, and interact with them in personal ways. It's really important.
All right.
So maybe we should let you. It's probably lunchtime for you guys now.
No, I don't know what time. What would you like us to do, Shantavigara? We seem to be out of questions here, unless anyone has anything else.
If anyone has anything else, now's the time. Speak now or forever hold your peace, I guess. If not, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank both of you. One of the things that stood out to me those years, 15 years ago when you came to Trinidad, was how nice you two were as a married couple. It's something I reflect on. Like, it was very endearing to see, and reflecting on some of the things that you were saying. Like one good friend of mine who he lives in Mayapur now. At our wedding, like he said to me after, that one of the most important services you could do is to, be happy in your marriage. And the weight of what he said to me at that time, it didn't really dawn on me, because he said it just after the wedding ceremony, shortly after. But as I grow older and like I realize what a responsibility it is. I consider myself very much to still be a work in progress,
Yes.
trying to be better.
Yes.
But the improvement that I have made over the years, it's largely in part the advice and little tips and tricks and how-tos and that you did in that seminar. I think it's a very valuable service that you and the Grihastha Vision team does, because frankly speaking, the majority of our society is either married or will become married. And how to do it effectively is really important. Not just to be married, but to be good and married together as a team. And like, I think not just me, I'm just one person speaking on behalf of a small group, but I think that's something you must hear echoed in almost every territory you visit. Like, it's really eye-opening, and I, amongst many, are very grateful for the service that you do. Thank you very much.
Srila Prabhupada gave us all a very great but simple responsibility to chant and be happy. Is that always easy? No, it's not always easy. But he gave us ways and means through his books and his instructions to come to platform where we can transcend and overcome all the difficulties and obstacles so we can become happy. So I encourage you all to continue reading Srila Prabhupada's books and deeply try to understand how to apply them in your life. So thank you all very much, and we hope to see you all in Trinidad next year. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai, Haribol.
Ki Jai.
Haribol.